The Point of View is sponsored by Cowbell Coffee. Taste it, love it.
Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, we get the right guests, ask the relevant questions on issues that matter to you. Tonight is a double header. We're leading with the latest with the National Cathedral. In fact, both interviews are stemming from last week's midterm budget. Secretariat, the finance minister, gave an overview of where we were, and for the first time did not request for any money. He also gave an update on the National Cathedral, which has generated a lot of controversy, particularly his announcement that the cathedral will be soliciting donations from Ghanaians to help put it up. So in a two-part show, I'll be talking to the man who is in charge of the Secretariat for the National Cathedral, Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah, on the what, the whys, and the wherefores of this cathedral. And later on, the ranking member of the Finance Committee in Parliament, Kasialatu Forsen, has a lot to say about Ghana's debt position. He says it's precarious, we are in serious times, and he thinks something drastic ought to be done. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us.
I woke up this morning.
Nothing wakes me up better than a cup of cowbell coffee. Delicious coffee aroma.
How can you forget your lines again?
I'm sorry, sir, just that it tastes really good.
Cowbell coffee.
Enjoy the delicious creamy coffee taste of 3-in-1 Cowbell coffee.
Taste it, love it. It's a beautiful day.
Waiting.
Cowbell coffee. Taste it, love it.
This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
So we'll start with Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah. He is the Executive Director of the National Cathedral Secretariat. He's joined us to give us some quick answers on the cathedral and where we are, the update of the Finance Minister, his reaction to some of the complaints, and whether they've raised any money since the announcement. Doc, great to have you. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Where has the cathedral got into? Where are we with the building?
Quite a significant milestone, quite exciting. In fact, that's what we actually wanted to update the nation, and somehow it was, it's still kind of quite exciting actually.
Have you been surprised by the reaction of people to the cathedral conversation?
Not the general conversation. I was a bit surprised by the donation part, because I thought it was almost a logical extension of what we've been saying. The president was categorical that really he didn't, although this was a national monument, a sacred space for the nation where the formal religious activities, state funerals, state burials would take place, he still wanted this to be a partnership between the state and the church. And so for us, it was really an update to say, look, that fundraising partnership is ongoing. So that was what the update was on, and that there's been quite a number of different fundraising initiatives. And in fact, we are actually launching, for that was said that the trustees are launching this initiative dubbed Kitobiansa, in which we want to mobilize as many Ghanaians as possible to write their name in the history of building the National Cathedral. The objective was really to say, look, let's almost democratize the fundraising, because the fundraising so far, we focus on the big hitters, because those are the ones that give you kind of big monies immediately. I mean, so we've had a business roundtable. You go, somebody can give you $500,000, and so that, and then in fact, one of our donors actually, who gives us monthly, she gives $5,000 a month, came to the office and says, look, I have friends who want to give, and yet they are not, I mean, I'm retired, they are not able to give the kind of money you are asking. Why don't you expand the fundraising and really allow as many Ghanaian Christians as possible to be able to give?
Okay.
And she actually came up with the concept, that then inspired, so I did a proposal for the board and said, look, now why don't we expand it, try and raise about 1 million Ghanaian Christians who would give us 100 cedis a month.
Okay.
What that does is that you almost kind of develop a sense of ownership, collective ownership for the National Cathedral. But in addition, you really allow a sense of, the president talked in 2018 about building this historic coalition which will arise to build the National Cathedral. So that's really, so for us, it was a logical kind of update on that.
In terms of the Christians in Ghana,
right,
and their role in national development, that's not in question. The issue of partnership between church and state for development is also not in question.
Right.
But why must it be manifested through a cathedral? Because some people feel that of all the things we need now, a cathedral should not be one of the priorities we should be spending anything on, not much less $200 million.
Right. I think it's really a misunderstanding of nation building. You see, nation building does not exist in such, look, we finish with health and then we move to infrastructure, we move to education. In fact, it's really a comprehensive, and I think what this nation, part of our nation building suffered after Nkrumah was that we had people who actually were not trained for nation building. And whatever they did right. Soldiers are not trained to build nations, they're trained to defend nations. And so the kind of nation building project, that real infrastructure that the nation should have had never took place. So for instance, the need for a sacred space. In fact, all nation buildings have these sacred spaces. I mean, so even if you look at our traditional nation building, the whole chieftaincy civilization, you have the palace, you have the Nkonya Dam where prayers are, and you have the Bemu where the dead, the chiefs are buried. But if you bring it to the modern state, you have the Westminster Abbey, you have the Notre Dame. These are important because that's where the sacred rituals of the nation takes place.
But
over
but
time.
what about the view that the Constitution is framed?
Let me finish.
You can use that.
Okay.
The Constitution is framed to make Ghana what do you call it, a secular state.
Right.
So if you are making all these references, Ghana is multi-religious.
Right.
So if you are just talking about sacred space, why must it be a cathedral?
Right, but if you look at the history of our nation building, in fact, the modern state, Ghana, is located within the Judeo-Christian tradition because we were colonized by the English. In fact, so it's our judicial system. So it's really almost, can I say, it's almost an accident of history that the sacred tradition within which our nation building takes place is the Judeo-Christian tradition, partly because that's the tradition which colonized us. So it's really not...
But if you go there, then you are contradicting Nkrumah because he was quite against what he calls he says neo-colonialism is the last stage of imperialism.
Okay.
And in fact, there are writers like Chinwins who talk about decolonizing the African mind.
Right.
And Kwame Nkrumah was very clear about our independence. The substance of our independence to decolonize our thinking.
Right.
So if you're saying that our colonization was from the the Judeo-Christian tradition, why should we continue that mindset?
No, it's not a mindset. I mean, I think we're talking about institutions here. It's not a mindset. I mean, it's the principles. Look, nation building is composed of infrastructure. I mean, so you have the infrastructure for the executive, irrespective of which tradition. You have for the legislature, you have the judiciary, and you have a sacred space. What I'm saying is that sacred space, which is part of every nation building project, was located, you're asking why a cathedral. And I'm saying it's a cathedral. It's almost like, okay, why a court? Why the Supreme Court? Why a parliament?
Because the judiciary is one of the arms of government, it's very clear in the Constitution.
But you see,
but the Constitution doesn't make a reference to a sacred space.
No, but what I'm saying is that every nation building, and that's what I'm giving examples, all. Why would, even a secular state like France, why would Macron say, look, the Notre Dame is the epicenter of our national life? because over time, these sacred spaces really become the spaces around which you have these collective rituals that build that sense of nationhood. I mean, so really, really, it's almost like partly because of where the society, the context, the necessity to actually develop the foundations of our nation building becomes almost like a luxury. And yet, these are the foundation blocks that allows us collectively. I mean, if you look at the great cathedrals and what they did, the whole creativity, and that's what we're trying to, in fact, part of the update was showing what we're going to do with the National Cathedral. Beyond the sacred space, we're expanding it. In fact, we have expanded it to include this Museum of the Bible that looks at the history, role, and impact of Christianity, the church in our nation. The first of its kind looks at the role of Africa in the Bible and Africans in the Bible, including the African diaspora.
So is that update the reason why the cost changed? Because initially we were told it was 100 million. Now we're told it's $200 million.
And initially, once again, initially, the finance minister was asked how much was it going to cost. And he says over 100 million. In fact, that's the, and you can go back. Yes, that's what
he didn't say exactly.
No, I mean, that's, you can
go
be
there.
Verified. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And then, of course, you expand it. We want, Bible Museum, that's almost as, in fact, bigger than what is even in Washington. You have a biblical garden that is going to have the trees and shrubs of the Holy Land, because really, essentially, what we're trying to do is to use the National Cathedral to almost make Ghana the hub of religious tourism, the hub. We want to make it the center of African Christianity. And you can only do that when you have this, like Africa's first Bible Museum, Africa's first biblical gardens. We have a restaurant, 300-seater restaurant.
But what purpose will that serve to the immediate needs of the citizens? You're talking about nation building. People are talking about priorities.
Yes.
So you're in a pandemic. Within the same month, the government asked for $200 million loan from the international development agencies to purchase vaccines, which incidentally is the same cost of the cathedral.
Right.
So in terms of prioritization, is that not a misplaced priority to be raising $200 million for a monument or a building when there are more arguably pressing physical human needs? I
think it brings me back to my first thing that, look, nation building is not about, you see, that is what we missed, really. I mean, and I think we might have some time to look at our history. That nation building, Nkrumah understood it. In fact, if you look at him systematically, he was building all this and then kind of it got truncated. But essentially, and using the COVID, look, we had already said we're going to build a national cathedral, an emergency comes up. Do you stop everything because of the emergency? You don't. So you then begin to say, how do we strategize? And that's why he says, look, the president was almost a visionary to say, look, instead of the state, that I really don't want this to be a burden on the finances of the state. So I want Ghanaian Christians to help me do this. So the fundraising initiative is not the state going to look for money. In fact, that's for me that's why I say if you ask for surprise, that's why I was surprised, because I thought people say, oh, okay, the president said Ghanaian Christians would actually go raise the money, and now the trustees are actually launching an initiative that allow us to build this kind of historic coalition that will ensure this collective national ownership of the cathedral. But other fundraising initiatives, like I told you about this business roundtable we launched in Kumasi, we have this external fundraising too, where there are institutions, foundations, who historically have given to this kind of project. So on the 19th of September, we're having a fundraiser in Houston. And this is really targeted, just the key high net worth individuals who have the capacity to give you at least $1 million. And then 24th in New York.
The impression is created that we sort of did not count the cost. In fact, somebody posted on social media a scripture that says, which of you sitting down to build a tower does not count the cost? And I think that's what he said. And then he exchanges tower for cathedral. And he suggests that the change in the cost estimate seems as if we didn't really think through this thing properly.
Actually, we did. In fact, that's what I'm trying to say, part of the update. It was to say that, look, for the cathedral to be viable, let's integrate an economic engine. In fact, so what we are doing actually is an investment. The cost expansion is really because, one, you are integrating a museum, a 350-seater restaurant. So all these are income generators. So that's what you.
So it's an investment. So when is the payback period then?
How
much are we going?
Actually, no, Bernard, be serious on this one because
no, I am. But once you say it's an investment, are you what method of evaluation are you using to say that in X amount of years it will raise this amount of money?
In fact, we actually have an economic consultant looking at this, looking at the whole economic impact of both the visitors coming here, the usage of the facilities, and within a 3-year, 5-year period, based on just very, very, very conservative estimates, about $83 million.
Within 3 to 5 years, you will reach $83 million.
5 years after that, yeah.
Through which economic?
First of all, we have banquet halls, we have multi-purpose centers, we have 350 restaurants. You have the Bible Museum, the first of its kind. But more critically, though, what we are trying to do is also beyond just the national level usage, is to drive traffic here. So in fact, some of the things we've been doing is really, at the moment, develop some of these international partnerships, so that once the cathedral gets opened, you're going to have this international events being hosted here. Part of the reason why we are developing the National Cathedral to also include the Bible and African diaspora is that we actually want to use the cathedral as part of our attempts to link up with the African diaspora through faith. We are using economic, cultural, and other methods, but we believe that everywhere the African diaspora is, in fact, what defines the African diaspora is not economic power, but actually our spirituality. So the challenge then is, can we use that spirituality as a means to drive in traffic, diaspora traffic here? So in October, we are convening this global meeting, leading experts in African Christianity, but the diaspora, to say, look, input into this. We really want this to be a service, to provide a service not just to Ghanaians and Africans, but also to you, our brothers in the diaspora. Speak into this. How would you want us to develop this museum, this cathedral, to ensure that it appeals to you, to ensure that you would want to come here on pilgrimages?
Some people feel that it being a political promise in itself doesn't sit right. That if Christians wanted a cathedral for themselves, Christian leaders could have come together to build it, and they have enough money and membership to do it. Why did they have to take a political promise for that to even materialize?
Because it's a political project. I mean, it's a
political project.
No, the president said this was a legacy project. In fact, that is why he used 6 March. And most of our activities, milestones. So 6 March 2017 was the sword cutting. 6 March 2018 was the unveiling of the design. 5th March 2020 was the groundbreaking. Why are we doing that? It's really to stress the national character of the cathedral. The president was very, very specific, categorical, that the nation lacked this sacred space for the formal religious activities of state. So that is the primary role. And then we are saying that in addition, like most of the great cathedrals, let's add all these activities that makes the place relevant to the average Ghanaian, the Ghanaian Christian who he's calling on to help. So first and foremost,
is it not foisting his faith on the nation, where there are a sizable percentage of the population who do not believe in that? I think we've answered that. I mean, that most of the formal religious activities of our nation are based in that tradition. It's nothing. It's not really about imposing religion. Look at most of our state funerals. I mean, the services within which they are conducted are really within this. It has nothing to do with anybody wanting to impose a religion. It's really a part of the historic development of the nation state we call Ghana. Okay.
That is the tradition in which we. But then you are conscious of the fact that if you don't develop it well, it might affect other religions. And that's why I'm happy that even before this is finished, we have a national mosque, and the president was the one who opened it.
Some people feel it's an equalization attempt.
That's why we've never used that. So I'll just say that...
In fact, some writers even say it's a misnomer to call it a national mosque. In fact, Harun Atta says it's not a national mosque. He writes and says that it's really a fulfillment of a promise after the 79 demolition of a mosque.
Well, that's his view. That's fine. I mean, that's so everybody can call it what you want. But the key issue really is that, and as the Supreme Court indicated, that we are a country of very religious people. And so our religiosity must be factored in our nation building. And so this national level infrastructures allows our constitution to almost align with our religious aspirations. It doesn't make it a secular state. But in addition, really, and once again, kind of allusion to the Supreme Court, it allows us to build cohesion.
A couple of quick questions for you.
Okay.
A listener says, a viewer says, Bernard, there's nothing wrong with the National Cathedral. However, breaking government bungalows to erect a cathedral is abhorrent. They should have looked for a trade fair site or a different location. What's your comment on that?
I think the purpose determines location. I mean, I think we've talked about this, that mostly if you look at the national cathedrals, they are about the centers of power, particularly Parliament. I mean, so if you have Westminster Abbey, because that's what the formal rights of the nation. So if you're talking about the president being sworn in Parliament and the inaugural service in the cathedral, the distance. So it's really the purpose that determined the location.
There was a report today that you had raised $50 million already, attributed to a member of the Secretariat, executive secretary, something. I don't know the person's name. Is this correct?
I don't know that. I mean, money keeps coming in from various, so the banks would have to reconcile. So I don't know that. I mean, I don't know how much.
You cannot
money
confirm that they've raised, but since the Minister of Finance made this public announcement, what kind of response have you received?
Well, we've been running around trying to correct some of them, so we've not really followed. But the feedback we've gotten is that quite a number of people are given, but once again, we've tried to decouple the collection of monies from the Secretariat and really allow the banks to do that. Then they reconcile.
But prior to this announcement, how much had been pledged? Do you know?
Not that, because they keep coming in. I mean, so we have quite a significant number of pledges made. But once again, sometimes you want to be sure that you collect this before you come up.
Is the project not stalling for lack of funds?
No.
Based on your original timetable,
no.
Is the project on course?
It's stalled because of COVID.
Not because of lack of money?
No.
Okay.
In fact, it's actually stalled because of COVID. And now, kind of, we are happy with that's why I say, look, even with the COVID, we've really been able to, but actually allowed us to do the conceptual work. But the whole integration of the museum, biblical gardens, the integration of the restaurant. I mean, all these things one could not have done if we were running around had it not been for COVID. So I'm not saying that COVID was good.
Okay.
But really,
final point, a bit theological. I don't know if you're a pastor. There's a lot of feeling that even though Christians worship in church, the emphasis of New Testament Christianity is your body being the temple.
Right.
And Paul was quite clear on that, where people spoke about God does not dwell in temples made with hands.
Right.
So when the cathedral is presented as a national monument in honor of God, some people think it's misguided because wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there he is. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think the theologically, again, also, I mean, God does not exist in this. But I think it's really a symbolic representation that when we gather collectively, God's presence almost comes down in this space. I mean, Solomon really captures it well. That, look, I mean, a building like this cannot contain you. And yet, we are building this almost as an aspiration. That when we come there, we invoke your presence. And that's what the president was saying. Look, let's use this to invoke God's presence and blessings for the nation.
What is the short code before you go?
*979 hash.
Okay. *979
hash. And we really, I mean, we want people, because it will be history. I mean, so that's why we said, look, we want as many people as possible to really be part of this history of building the National Cathedral. If you look at the history of cathedrals, it's always been the case. In fact, I lived in a town called Nidaros in Norway for about 20 years. And the history, Norway's National Cathedral is located there. When it was going to be built, Norway was one of the poorest countries in Europe. And it's had the same conversations we're having. And yet, once people understood that, look, our identity as a nation was going to be tied to this, it led to one of the massive mobilizations ever in Norwegian history, and it's allowed this sense of nation building. And that's what we believe would happen in our country.
Since it's a long-term project, you are finishing in 2024, I'm sure we can get time to talk again.
Yes.
Thank you for your initial thoughts on this, Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah, Executive Director of the National Cathedral Secretariat. A lot of people confuse him as a reverend. He's not. He's a political scientist